once in a remote corner of a small, forgotten town. Nestled deep within an ancient and foreboding forest, there existed a place known as the Dark Forest. Locals whispered tales of its malevolent reputation, warning travelers to steer clear of its shadowy depths. But legends have a way of tempting the curious, and the allure of the Dark Forest was no exception. It was a crisp autumn evening when Emma, a young woman with a thirst for adventure, arrived in town. She had heard the stories, but she paid them little mind. Emma was a seeker, a wanderer of the unknown, and the Dark Forest called to her like a siren in the night. She walked deeper into the woods, her footsteps rustling through fallen leaves as a growing unease settled in her chest. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches entwined like skeletal fingers, creating a thick canopy that blocked out the moonlight. As Emma ventured farther into the Dark Forest, she began to lose her sense of direction. The trail seemed to twist and turn, leading her deeper into its heart. It was as though the very forest itself was conspiring to keep her within its clutches. Hours passed, and the chill in the air grew more biting. Emma could feel eyes upon her, unseen watchers lurking among the trees. She tried to shake off her paranoia, attributing it to her own imagination running wild, but the feeling persisted, an eerie sensation that crawled up her spine. A strange melody wafted through the air, faint at first, like the soft whisper of the wind through leaves. Emma halted, her heart pounding in her chest. The melody grew louder, ethereal and haunting, as though it emanated from the very trees themselves. It beckoned her forward, a seductive and irresistible call. Unable to resist the lure of the music, Emma pressed on. She followed the sound deeper into the forest until she stumbled upon a clearing, bathed in an eerie blue light. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a gnarled, ancient oak tree. Its branches reached out like skeletal arms, and a figure was suspended from its boughs, swaying gently in the breeze. Emma gasped in horror when she saw the figure. It was a man, or what was left of him. His body was twisted and mangled, his face contorted in agony. He dangled from the tree, his lifeless eyes fixed on her, as though he had been put on display for her amusement. The melody grew louder, emanating from the man's gaping mouth. It was a mournful tune, a dirge of despair that filled the clearing with a sense of profound loss. Emma couldn't tear her gaze away from the macabre sight, even as her instincts screamed at her to run. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way, and she tumbled into a pit hidden by fallen leaves. She landed with a painful thud, her vision swimming as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. The pit was deep, its sides steep and slick with mud, making it impossible for her to climb out. Emma's heart raced as she realized she was trapped. Panic clawed at her, threatening to consume her sanity. Above her, the mournful melody continued, and she could hear the whispers of the forest, growing louder, a chorus of malevolent voices that seemed to speak directly into her mind. The hours passed in a blur of terror and confusion. Emma's mind began to play tricks on her, the darkness of the pit morphing into grotesque shapes and haunting faces. She was certain she could hear the man from the tree above her, his voice pleading for release. Just when she thought she couldn't bear it any longer, a soft voice whispered in her ear. "Follow me," it urged. its tone strangely soothing amidst the chaos. Emma glanced around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but she could see nothing in the darkness. With a desperate determination, Emma began to claw her way up the sides of the pit. Mud and leaves slipped through her fingers as she climbed, but the voice continued to guide her, offering encouragement and direction. Inch by agonizing inch, she made her way toward the surface. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emma's fingers grasped the edge of the pit. With one last surge of strength, she pulled herself free and collapsed onto the forest floor. Gasping for breath, she looked around, but the clearing and the hanging man were nowhere to be seen. The eerie blue light had dissipated, and the forest had returned to its normal, foreboding darkness. The forest seemed different now. As though it had accepted her presence, the malevolent whispers had faded, and the oppressive feeling of being watched had lifted. Emma stumbled through the woods, following the voice that had guided her to safety. After what felt like hours of wandering, Emma finally emerged from the dark forest. She was disheveled and covered in mud, her heart heavy with the horror she had witnessed. She couldn't explain what had happened or how she had escaped, but one thing was certain: she would never venture into the dark forest again. As Emma made her way back to town, she couldn't help but wonder about the man she had seen hanging from the tree. What had led him to such a gruesome fate, and who or what had been responsible for the haunting melody and the voices that had tormented her? In the pit, the townspeople greeted her with a mixture of relief and curiosity when she returned. They had heard of her ill-fated journey into the dark forest and had feared the worst. Emma tried to recount her experience, but her words came out as a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. The townspeople exchanged knowing glances and offered her sympathetic smiles. They had their own stories of the dark forest, of lost loved ones and unexplained disappearances. They knew that the forest held secrets that were best left undisturbed. In the days that followed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had been marked by her encounter with the dark forest. She suffered from vivid nightmares, visions of the hanging man and the haunting melody that had led her astray. She became obsessed with uncovering the truth, determined to unravel the mysteries that had ensnared her. As she delved deeper into her research, Emma discovered that the dark forest had a long and dark history. It was said to be a place of ancient rituals and dark magic, a realm where the boundaries between the living and the dead were blurred. The forest had claimed countless souls over the centuries, and its malevolent power had only grown stronger with time. Emma's obsession with the forest grew, and she began to piece together the fragments of its dark history. She learned of a cult that had once thrived in the depths of the forest, worshipping ancient, malevolent deities. They had performed unspeakable rituals, sacrificing innocent souls to gain power. One night, as Emma delved deeper into her research, she received an unexpected visitor. A man, shrouded in darkness, appeared at her doorstep. His eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and his voice sent shivers down her spine. "I know what you seek," he whispered, his voice like the wind rustling through leaves. "I can show you the way, but it comes at a price." Emma hesitated, her fear warring with her curiosity. She knew that the man was no ordinary being. and his offer was filled with danger. But the allure of uncovering the secrets of the dark forest was too powerful to resist. "What price?" she asked. Her voice trembling, the man smiled, revealing a row of sharp, pointed teeth. "Your soul," he replied. Emma's heart raced as she considered the consequences of her decision. She had already ventured too far into the darkness, and there was no turning back now. With a shaky nod, she accepted the man's offer, and he led her into the heart of the forest. The dark forest welcomed her like an old friend, its malevolent presence swirling around her. She followed the man deeper into the woods, guided by the same haunting melody that had lured her in before. The forest seemed to come alive, its trees twisting and contorting, as though they were watching her every move. At last they reached a clearing, and there, hanging from the gnarled oak tree, was the man she had seen on her first visit. His body was still twisted and mangled, his eyes lifeless and empty. But this time there was something different about him. His mouth moved, and the mournful melody escaped his lips. Emma's heart sank as she realized the truth. The man was not a victim, but a willing participant in the dark rituals of the forest. He had become a vessel for its malevolent power, bound to the oak tree for all eternity. The man turned to Emma, his eyes burning with a malevolent light. "You have paid the price," he said, his voice a chorus of tortured souls. "Now you shall join us." As the man's words echoed through the clearing, the forest itself seemed to come alive. Twisted forms emerged from the shadows, grotesque creatures with eyes that glowed like embers. They closed in around Emma, their claws and teeth gleaming in the eerie light. Emma's screams echoed through the forest as she was enveloped by the darkness. She had sought the secrets of the dark forest, and now she would become one of its twisted inhabitants, forever bound to its malevolent power. And so the legend of the dark forest continued, its secrets hidden from the world, its horrors known only to those foolish enough to seek them. The forest stood as a warning to all who dared to enter, a place where curiosity and obsession led to a fate worse than death. In the heart of the dark forest, Emma's voice joined the haunting melody that had ensnared her, a mournful dirge that echoed through the trees, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within its depths.